My work is influenced by the impulses behind literature and film, which is to say, telling a story. I suppose that's just a product of the fact that those were my influences when I was a child. I was obsessed with Disney, and I wanted to be an animator. I was raised in a very fundamentally religious family. The iconography of that, Jesus, these images from the Bible, all of those things were really, really powerful for me. But I never felt an inclination to believe in it. When I was 23 and in undergrad, my dad died really suddenly of heart disease. I started making images over and over of my dad, and it was a way to deal with it. I think I went back to the place that was always important to me, telling stories, and specifically telling stories about my life. For me, it's been a lot about death, because that has been something that has just been present in my life. From my dad dying to my sort of constant attempts to forestall my own death. I was born with a cardiac condition called hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. It's a gradual and progressive stiffening of your heart muscle, so that eventually it just becomes larger and larger and less contractile, and it just sort of ends up stopping. My senior year in high school, I had my first open heart surgery. So I had a pacemaker for 7 years, and then eventually my heart failure, progressed, and the pacemaker was no longer, effectively treating that condition. I came in for a regular appointment, and the doctor told me, "Don't leave yet, we may have a heart for you." And so my then girlfriend, my now wife, Adrian, we were there together, and so they put us in a room, and the next day I had a heart transplant. So the first drawing I made was based very directly off of a photograph that my wife took, and it was an image of me in the bed, still unconscious, with the breathing tube in my throat and everything connected to me. That first drawing reminded me a lot of like the films of David Cronenberg. There's this fusion of technology and organic matter. So that one drawing sort of set the tone for how I would approach the rest of the work. First of all, I sort of see the image in my head, what I would like it to be. It's something that I would envision in a movie, or something I would come up with in my own mind while reading a novel. I start gathering and collecting photographic sources that I think I can build an image from. And then sometimes I will draw it from looking at an object. So there's a combination of approaches and source materials that go into building each drawing. But even though I planned the drawing out in a lot of detail, it never quite ends up becoming the thing you imagine. What I try to do in the drawings is use really basic drawing techniques: cross-hatching, stippling, shading. I like to imagine that anybody could make the drawing if they had enough patience and time. One of the images that I took when I was in the hospital was of a collage that I found in the hallway of the transplant unit. And basically they look like children's collages from like a kindergarten class or something. And they'll say encouraging things, like this one says, "Go team, go." And it had pictures of all the transplant doctors. So I thought that that thing was a real condensation of the whole experience, the futility of trying to be encouraging when in fact you have no control over what's happening with your body. The waiting room in Methodist has this large cabinet, and inside this cabinet are these ceramic reproductions of wildlife, eagles, geese, tigers, and they all look really predatory, you know? There's this feeling of something terrible impending. It's a really, really uncomfortable environment for someone waiting to hear if their loved one is going to live or die. So that's another place where I thought that genre and real experience could come together and create something for the audience that they could enjoy, but also understand the emotion. There's always that moment when you go into surgery, when you're in the bed and they're about to wheel you off, and you say goodbye to whoever's there, and you don't know if you're gonna come back. As I was making the drawing, I was trying to find a way to sort of cobble together all my family members into an image. I took an image of all my family gathered together that was taken when I was married. It actually includes myself in the image, and it has my wife in her wedding dress and the rest of my family sort of in wedding clothes. That drawing is about the possibility at that moment of not surviving it, or the possibility of a future in which you get married. There are really some universal emotions or themes that transcend sex, race, culture. When you really burrow down and you start talking about things like death, sickness, love, relationships, the things that I try to deal with in my work are those very essential things.